The letterhead was embossed. Embossed. As in some machine, probably imported from Germany and operated by a man in a tiny, joyless uniform, had used pressure and heat to permanently raise the words Heritage Bluffs Homeowners Association above the rest of the 80-pound cardstock. It was the kind of paper you'd expect a cease and desist from a $1,000 an hour law firm to be printed on, not a note from a bunch of power-tripping neighbors who thought beige was a personality trait. I was standing at my mailbox, the metal door still warm from the afternoon sun, a bead of sweat tracing a path down my temple. My coffee was getting cold on the porch, my graphic design project was stalled on my monitor inside, and I was holding a piece of paper that radiated pure, unadulterated, bureaucratic malice. "What's it say?" Sarah, my wife, called from the porch. She was watering a hanging fern, the only plant on our property that, apparently, hadn't yet been deemed a felon. I read the crucial line aloud, my voice cracking with a sort of hysterical disbelief. "You have been fined $100 for the installation of unapproved flora." Sarah stopped watering. The fern, which I'm pretty sure was plastic, dripped silently. "Unapproved flora?" she repeated. "Unapproved flora," I confirmed, flipping the page over as if a "just kidding" might be printed on the back. It wasn't. Section 4, Subclause B. All homeowner-installed flora must be selected from the pre-approved pallet list, found in Appendix G. "Appendix G," Sarah murmured, her brow furrowing. "That's the one with the swatches?" "The very same." I looked over at the flower bed by the mailbox, the scene of the crime. 6 pink petunias, which we had purchased from a flat at Home Depot for $8.99, were wilting slightly in the heat. They looked like petunias. They were the vanilla ice cream of flowers. They were the Toyota Camry of the garden world. "Our petunias," I said, a dangerous calm settling over me. "They've fined us for the petunias." It was only 2 weeks ago. I can still smell the mulch and the faint chemical tang of fertilizer. We were in the garden section, pushing one of those flatbed carts with the one squeaky wheel that sounds like a dying bird. "These are nice," Sarah had said, picking up the 6-pack. "Pink brightens up the walkway." "Babe," I said, leaning against the cart, "they're petunias. They're the most inoffensive plant in human history. Nobody can possibly have a problem with petunias. It's physically impossible to be offended by them. You could plant these in front of a mafia safe house and the Don would be like, 'Hey, they're nice. They're nice.'" I remember looking at the little plastic tag. It just said, "Petunia, pink." "Narrator," I muttered to myself, standing by the mailbox. He was wrong. A high-pitched yapping sound broke my trance. I looked up. Oh, good. It was her. Brenda, our HOA president, was power-walking toward me. She was wearing a white tennis visor, indoors or out. 7 a.m. or 9 p.m., the visor was a constant. A Heritage Bluffs polo shirt tucked neatly into khaki shorts, and a look of profound, almost religious self-satisfaction. Tucked under her arm was her scepter of power, a thick clipboard. And yapping at her feet, straining against a leash so thin it looked like dental floss, was Sir Reginald, a 3-pound dog that was 90% eyeball and 10% malicious intent. "Frank, getting your mail, I see." She stopped a few feet away, just outside the blast radius of my personal space. I held up the embossed letter. It was shaking slightly. I blamed the caffeine. Brenda, this is performance art, right? This is a joke. Unapproved flora? Brenda's smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were tiny, calculating beads that were, I swear to God, scanning my house for other violations. I reflexively thought about the garbage cans, which I'd just pulled in. Were they pulled in enough? Was a millimeter of municipal green visible from the street? It's sunset coral, Frank, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of smugness you can't buy. You have to earn it by being elected to a volunteer position of imaginary power. I blinked. What? The petunias, she said, pointing at the offending flowers with her pen. They're sunset coral. The approved community palette, as you'll find in Appendix G, clearly states pastel pink or patriot red. Sunset coral is a direct violation of Section 4, Subclause B. It's a very aggressive-toned flower, don't you think? I looked at the flowers. I looked at Brenda. The flowers were pink. Just pink. Brenda, I said, trying to employ the let's be reasonable adults tone that I knew deep down was as useless as a screen door on a submarine. It's pink. It came from a plastic flat labeled pink. There was no option for pastel or patriot. It was just pink. She sighed, a long put-upon sound. We can't have people just choosing their own colors, Frank. That's how you get chaos. That's how you get teal mailboxes. She shuddered, as if I'd just suggested we start sacrificing goats on the village green. The rules are the rules. Read the bylaws. Have a lovely day. And with that, she and Sir Reginald power-walked away, leaving me in a cloud of fine letter-induced fury. I stormed inside, the letter crumpled in my fist. Sarah was at the kitchen counter, making coffee, the picture of calm. Brenda just fined us, I announced, throwing my keys into the bowl with more force than was strictly necessary. For the petunias. Sarah sighed. It wasn't a Brenda sigh. It was a why did I marry this man sigh. It was a sigh I was very, very familiar with. Frank, just pull them out. It's $100. I don't want to fight. Pull them out? Pull them out? No! I was pacing now, from the fridge to the sink and back. It's not the money, Sarah. It's the principle. She called them sunset coral. With a straight face. This is tyranny. This is suburban tyranny. What's next? She going to fine us because the sky isn't the approved shade of heritage blue? Okay, Spartacus, Sarah said, handing me a mug of coffee. Just pay the fine. I am not getting into another war of the wrong-sized recycling bin with her. I still can't make eye contact with the mailman after you tried to serve him a subpoena. You'd print it off the internet. That was different. He was colluding with her. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot. It was bitter. It was fuel. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. No, I'm not paying it. And I'm not pulling them out. I'm going to fight this. With law. Sarah just shook her head. Frank, don't. You'll just make it worse. Worse? How can it be worse? I held up the letter. We're already at sunset coral. The next step is a tribunal. I'm getting the binder. The color drained from Sarah's face. Frank, no, not the binder. Oh yes, I said, marching toward the hall closet. The binder. The binder was a 3-ringed monstrosity, a white, plastic-covered brick that weighed as much as a small child. The spine just read, Heritage Bluffs CNRs. I'm pretty sure CNR stood for Covenants and Ridiculousness. It was given to us at closing, and I'd immediately tossed it in the hall closet, where it had been slowly decomposing next to a broken umbrella and a single forlorn snow boot. I heaved it onto the dining room table. A puff of dust, or perhaps pure, distilled despair, plumed into the air. When I opened it, the metal rings made a sound like a rusty bear trap springing. "Okay, Sarah, what's worse?" I said. "This or the sunset coral?" Sarah, who was wisely pouring herself a glass of wine at 4 p.m., just raised her glass and said, "I'm staying out of it. Just try not to get us sued." "Sued? I'm the one being persecuted here." I sat down. This was my war room. The binder was my enemy's code book. For the next 2 hours, I read. And let me tell you, it was a journey into the beige, nitpicky, utterly baffling mind of the Heritage Bluffs founding fathers, who I'm pretty sure were just Brenda and 2 other ladies named Carol. "This thing," I muttered to myself, "is a masterpiece of bureaucratic nonsense." I found all the classics. All sheds must be painted in an approved neutral tone. See Appendix D, the Taupeology. Garbage cans may not be visible from the street ever, not even for 1 second, on penalty of being shunned. All exterior holiday lighting must be warm white, color code number FFF8E1, and must not under any circumstances be set to twinkle, chase, or convey joy. I found the section on mailboxes, must be heritage black, pole must be heritage white. I found the section on fences, 4-foot picket, 3.5 inches between pickets, no more, no less. I was looking for a loophole. I was looking for anything. A countersuit. A Magna Carta of suburban freedom. My eyes were bleeding. My brain was numb. I'd reached a state of zen-like frustration. And then I got to it. Section 7. Landscaping mandates. This was the motherlode. It was a long, long list, pages of it. It was divided into 2 columns, approved flora and prohibited flora. The approved list was exactly what you'd expect. Red maple, American boxwood, creeping phlox, pastel pink only, Indian hawthorn. It was a list of the most boring, generic, unalive plants in existence, a list of plants that had just given up. The prohibited list was, frankly, way more interesting. Bamboo, all forms highly invasive. Bradford pear, odor concerns and weak limbs. Rose bushes, thorn hazard to children and pets. Morning glory, aggressive, will climb, looks messy. I was reading this for an hour, cross-referencing with the sunset coral addendum. My eyes were glazing over. I was about to give up, to go outside and just eat the petunias in a fit of rage. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. I looked up from the binder, out the dining room window. My neighbor, Dave, the one who mows his lawn twice a week and vacuums his driveway, had a perfect carpet-like fescue lawn. It was a shade of green that probably didn't exist in nature. And right at the edge, where the grass met his driveway, was a single, defiant weed. A bright yellow, cheerful, utterly common dandelion. My heart, which had been slowly sinking into my stomach, suddenly did a little bowing. I looked back at the binder. My fingers, trembling with a new, strange energy, flew through the pages. Dahlia, daisy, daylily, dogwood. Nothing. I flipped to the prohibited list. Nothing. I checked under W for weed. No. Y for yellow flower of Satan. No. My hands were literally shaking now. They forgot, I whispered. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. They forgot. I said it louder this time. In their zeal to ban sunset coral and thorn hazards and aggressive morning glories, in their obsessive beige-fueled quest for absolute taupe-colored control, they forgot the single most common, prolific, and infuriating plant in all of human history. They forgot the dandelion. It wasn't on the approved list. It wasn't on the prohibited list. It was unregulated. It existed in a legal gray area, a beautiful, yellow, fluffy-headed gray area. I looked out the window at Dave's single, lonely weed. Then I looked at my own lawn, a perfectly acceptable mix of fescue and Bermuda grass. A low, slow, slightly unhinged chuckle started in my chest. It bubbled up, and before I knew it, I was leaning back in my chair laughing, a full-on, tears in my eyes, clutching my stomach laugh. Sarah poked her head in from the kitchen, a look of genuine alarm on her face. "Are you okay? Did you finally snap? Did the binder win?" I wiped a tear from my eye, trying to compose myself. I held up a hand, still grinning like a madman. "Honey," I said, my voice full of a joy she hadn't heard in a while. "Quick question. How do you really feel about grass?" "It's fine," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Frank, what did you do?" I slammed the binder shut, a cloud of triumphant dust exploding from its spine. "Not yet," I said, grabbing my car keys. "But I'm about to. I'm going to give Brenda exactly what she wants. A yard that fully complies with the bylaws. A yard that is technically perfect." The next morning, I was a man on a mission. Sarah watched me with a mix of terror and, frankly, admiration? Maybe? No, probably just terror. My mission was simple. My lawn, all 1,000 square feet of HOA-approved, perfectly adequate grass, had to go. The petunias had to go. The sad little boxwood that looked like it was in a permanent state of depression? It definitely had to go. This, I learned, is a harder sell than you'd think. I started making calls. This section of the story is best told as a montage of me, sitting on my porch, getting progressively more frustrated. "Hi, Greenscape Solutions? Yes, I have a job. I need you to rip out my entire front lawn. Sod, flowers, everything." Pause. "Right. And replace it with?" "Dirt." Pause. "Just dirt. Brown, flat, dirt." Click. They hung up. I tried again. "Hi, Lawn and Order? Great name. Seriously, very clever. Look, I'm doing a minimalist Zen garden thing. You know? Very wabi-sabi. And to start, I need my yard scraped, down to the soil." Pause. "Right. A Zen garden. You want gravel? Boulders? We got a great price on river rock." No, just the dirt. I'm going to commune with it for a while before I... Zen." Long pause. "You got money?" "Yes, I have money. We're booking 6 weeks out, sir, for dirt jobs." Click. I was about to give up. I was about to go buy a shovel and do it myself, which, given my general physical condition, which I'd describe as soft, would have taken me 6 months and probably resulted in a trip to the hospital. Then, on my 5th try, I hit pay dirt. Literally. "Hi, Miguel's Landscaping?" "Yeah. What you need?" The voice was gravelly, no nonsense. "I need my entire front yard scraped to the dirt." Pause. "When?" My heart leaped. As soon as possible? Got a cancellation. We can be there in an hour. Costs extra. Sold, I said, nearly weeping with joy. 55 minutes later, a truck that looked like it had survived several small wars rumbled to a stop in front of my house. A man who looked like he'd driven the truck in those wars hopped out. He was stocky, with a sun-weathered face that said he had seen every weird, stupid thing a suburban homeowner could possibly do. This was Miguel. "Mr. Johnson?" he said, not offering a hand, just an appraising squint. "You're the dirt guy? Miguel? Yes. Thank you for coming." I gestured expansively at my yard. "This is it. I want it gone. All of Ellet, the grass, the sunset coral petunias, that sad little bush that looks like it gave up on life." Miguel looked at my yard. He looked at me. He looked over at Brenda's pristine yard next door, which looked like it was maintained by elves with tiny scissors. His eyes slowly traveled back to my house. "This, like a divorce thing?" he asked, pulling a crumpled notepad from his shirt pocket. "You trying to piss someone off?" I burst out laughing. "You're very intuitive, Miguel. Let's just say I'm moving into a new phase of ecological awareness. I want a natural look." Miguel just grunted, which I think was a laugh in his native language. "Pays the same," he shrugged. "My guys will have this scraped by lunch. But Mr. Johnson, you're gonna have a hell of a mud problem when it rains." "Oh, I'm planting," I said, a wide, beatific smile spreading across my face. "Don't you worry. I'm planting." "Right. Zen garden." He waved to two guys in the truck, and in a flurry of activity, they unloaded a sod cutter and a wheelbarrow. It was glorious, the sound of the sod cutter, like a giant zipper pulling up the carpet of my conformity. I sat on the porch with Sarah. She had her laptop, pretending to work, but I could see her watching. And of course, Brenda was watching. She was standing in her front window, partially obscured by her pristine, heritage white blinds. But I could see her. She wasn't just watching. She was vibrating. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. I gave her a little wave. She disappeared from the window instantly, like a frightened groundhog. "You're enjoying this way too much, Frank," Sarah said, not looking up from her screen. "It's the first time I've felt alive in months," I said. By noon, as promised, they were done. My yard was a glorious 1,000-square-foot patch of rich, brown, beautiful dirt. It looked like a construction site. It looked like the beginning of a housing development. It looked perfect. Brenda was back on her porch, clipboard in hand, looking pleased. Oh, I could see it. She thought she'd won. She thought this was my shame. She thought this was me, ripping out my failure, preparing to install the patriot red tulips she so desperately craved. Oh, Brenda, you sweet summer child. That night, I executed phase 2. I went online. You can buy anything on the internet, and I mean anything. I typed bulk dandelion seeds into a search engine, and my world opened up. I wasn't just buying seeds. I was buying premium Taraxacum officinale seeds. The good stuff. A 10-pound bag. Covers 5,000 square feet, the ad promised. I only had 1,000. Even better, I whispered to the glowing screen. The reviews were illuminating. My neighbor's perfect lawn is no more. A++++. Worked faster than I thought. The HOA is furious. Thank you. Saran. A beautiful, low-maintenance, pollinator-friendly sea of yellow. I clicked Buy Now with a sense of righteous purpose. 2 days and $80 later, a plain, unmarked box arrived on my, now very out-of-place, porch. The planting was anticlimactic. It was a bright, suburban Tuesday afternoon. I filled my normal, everyday grass seed spreader with 10 pounds of what was essentially agricultural-grade spite. And I walked, back and forth, whistling a jaunty tune. Just a normal guy, planting a normal something. My neighbor, Dave, was, of course, edging his driveway. He paused, wiping his brow, and looked over. Frank? Buddy? He called out, confusion etched on his face. What's going on? Planting, Dave, I called back, cheerfully. Just planting. It's gonna be beautiful. It's a lot of seeds, man, he said, squinting at the clouds of tiny specks I was broadcasting. What is it? That fancy microclover? I hear that's good for the ecosystem. Something like that, Dave, I yelled, giving the spreader an extra vigorous shake as I passed the spot where the petunias used to be. Something just like that. The next 2 weeks were a test of my patience. But unlike Brenda, my patience is long, and my motives are pure. Purely vengeful. I watered. Oh, how I watered. I was out there every morning and every evening with the garden hose, diligently misting my 1,000-square-foot patch of dirt. You're watering dirt, Frank, Sarah said from the doorway on day 3. You have to keep the seeds moist, honey, I said, with the seriousness of a botanist. It's crucial for germination. Brenda watched me. Her smugness had faded, replaced by that same twitchy confusion from before. She couldn't fine me for watering dirt. It wasn't in the bylaws. I checked. Section 8, water usage, only prohibited excessive runoff onto neighboring properties and recreational water slides. On day 6, it happened. I was on my hands and knees, squinting. Sarah, come here. What? Is it a rare bird? No, look, I pointed. There, poking up from the brown expanse, was a tiny, tiny speck of green. And another, and another. My dirt was sprouting. By day 10, it was a fine green fuzz. It was happening. It was working. And then on day 14, I woke up, poured my coffee, and looked out the window. And I wept, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. It wasn't dirt anymore. It wasn't fuzz. It was glorious. My yard was a sea, a carpet, a brilliant, shocking, offensive, unbylawable ocean of bright, blazing yellow. It wasn't a lawn. It was a meadow, a 3-inch-high carpet of dandelions. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, every single seed must have taken. My yard looked like a highlighter had exploded. It looked like the sun had fallen and shattered into a million pieces, right there between Dave's perfect fescue and Brenda's patriot red tulips. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I took my coffee, went to the porch, and sat. I didn't have to wait long. I heard the squeak of her screen door, the thud of her visor-clad head hitting the door frame. I'm imagining that part. And then the stomp, stomp, stomp of her New Balance sneakers on the pavement. Sir Reginald was yapping, a sound like a wet balloon being stabbed. She didn't have her clipboard. This was no longer official business. This was personal. She stopped at the edge of my new, glorious meadow. Her mouth was open. Her face was turning a color I'd only seen once before. Sunset coral. Frank! She shrieked, a sound that probably scared birds in the next county. Frank, what is this? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I leaned back in my chair. Morning, Brenda. Beautiful day, isn't it? I call it Le Jardin de la Résistance. These are weeds, she screamed, clutching her tiny, vibrating dog. "You planted weeds!" I held up a hand, affecting a look of gentle correction. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, Brenda. Weed is such a judgmental term, don't you think? I prefer low-maintenance, pollinator-friendly ground cover. It's fantastic for the bees. I'm just doing my part for the ECO system, as Dave would say." You abomination, she sputtered. "This is an abomination. It's tacky." I wagged a finger. "Brenda, as you yourself taught me, tacky isn't in the bylaws. Only unapproved flora is. And guess what?" I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out a Ziploc bag. Inside it, I'd placed a laminated copy of Section 7. "I checked," I said in a sing-song voice. "And Taraxacum officinale is not on the prohibited list, nor is it on the approved list. It is, therefore, unregulated flora. It's perfectly legal." Brenda's eyes were bugging out. I think Sir Reginald had fainted. You're going to get another fine," she stammered, trying to regain her footing. For lawn maintenance, Section 5. All lawns must be kept in a neat and tidy condition, not to exceed 4 inches in height." "Go ahead," I said, taking another triumphant sip. "I beg you to fine me for that. Because, as you'll see in Section 2, definitions, a lawn is defined as, and I quote, a uniform covering of grass. And this," I gestured to my field of yellow, "is clearly not grass. Therefore, the lawn maintenance rules do not apply." Checkmate. Her face went through a range of colors I'd never seen in nature. She sputtered. She tried to form words. Yeah. "Have a lovely day, Brenda," I said, giving her my brightest smile. She let out a sound like a tea kettle reaching a boil, spun on her heel, and stormed off. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," she shrieked over her shoulder. "Tell him I said hi," I yelled back, "and ask him if he likes dandelion wine." The next week was, perhaps, the most satisfying of my entire adult life. The yellow flowers were beautiful, but I knew, as a student of the one Google search I'd done, that this was only Phase 1. Phase 2 began on a breezy Wednesday. I woke up, and my yellow meadow was white. The dandelions had gone to seed. My entire yard had transformed, overnight, from a sea of yellow spite to a 1,000-square-foot cloud of fluffy white, airborne spite. And the wind, oh, the wind. It was blowing directly toward Brenda's house. I sat on my porch, drinking my coffee, and watched the show. It was like a biblical plague, a gentle, fluffy, passive-aggressive plague. My pollinator-friendly ground cover was now seeding. The little white parachutes were drifting over, everywhere. I watched them land, like tiny, tiny paratroopers of chaos, on Dave's perfect dark green fescue. I saw them settle, like a dusting of snow, on Brenda's patriot red tulips and her American boxwoods. I had created a monster. A beautiful, self-replicating, HOA bylaw-compliant monster. It was awesome. Sarah was less impressed. "Frank, this is, a lot. Dave is crying." I looked over. Dave was, in fact, on his hands and knees on his lawn, with a handheld vacuum, trying to suck the seeds out of his grass. He did look heartbroken. "He'll be fine," I said, perhaps a bit too callously. It's just ecological sharing. The peace couldn't last. Brenda was, if anything, a creature of action, and when her own clipboard failed her, she escalated. The knock on the door came at 3 p.m. Not a Brenda knock, which was a sharp, judgmental rap, rap, rap. This was a thud, thud, thud. This was official. I opened the door. 2 police officers. 2 actual, real-life, city-employed police officers. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things, and a name tag that read Miller. The other one was a rookie, looked about 19, and was trying very, very hard to look serious. "Sir, you Frank Johnson?" Miller asked. "That's me," I said, trying to look like a normal, non-dandelion farmer. "Everything okay?" Officer Miller let out a sigh. It was not a normal sigh. It was a sigh that came from deep in his soul. It was a sigh that had seen 1,000 petty neighbor disputes, 100 cat-in-a-tree calls, and at least one "my neighbor's music is too loud" at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was a sigh of profound existential exhaustion. "Officer sighs a lot," I dubbed him in my head. "Sir," he said, "we received a call about your lawn." I feigned innocence. "My lawn? Is it committing a crime? Is it loitering?" The rookie, bless his heart, coughed. I think he was laughing. Miller just stared at me with dead eyes. "We got a report of propagation of a noxious weed," Miller said, in a monotone, as if reading from a script he hated. "From your HOA president, a Ms. Brenda." He checked his notes. "Ms. Brenda Vickers. She seems to be under the impression that you are running some kind of illegal dandelion farm." I put my hand on my heart. "Officer, I am shocked. Shocked. I am just a simple man who enjoys taraxacum. Is that a crime? I didn't think that was a crime. It's fantastic for the bees." "The bees," Miller repeated, his mustache twitching. "Sir," the rookie piped up, trying to be helpful, "she's citing City Ordinance 14B, public nuisance." Miller sighed again, this time closing his eyes, as if summoning strength. "We checked, sir. Ordinance 14B is about unmuffled motorcycles and excessive noise. It says nothing about fluffy seeds. This is a civil matter, sir. It's not a police matter." I let a look of profound relief wash over my face. Oh, thank goodness. "So, you're not here to arrest my dandelions?" Officer Miller looked at his partner. He looked at my yard, which was currently shedding in the breeze. He looked back at me. I could see the battle raging in his eyes, the desire to just end this versus the letter of the law. The law won, but barely. "No, sir, we are not. We will not be arresting your weeds." "Pollinator-friendly ground cover," I corrected him gently. "Right." He put his notepad away. He was done. "But, sir, please." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just fix it. My radio is blowing up with dandelion sightings. I've got a domestic dispute on 4th Street, and I'm here, talking about flowers. Just mow it, or something. I've got better things to do." "I understand completely, officer," I said, full of civic understanding. "Thank you for your service." The cops left. As they pulled away, I turned and waved, very, very slowly, to Brenda, who was standing on her porch, her arms crossed, looking absolutely, murderously furious. I had won the battle. But I knew. Brenda was about to declare all-out war. The flyer was taped to my door. Not folded, not in the mailbox. taped, with what looked like duct tape. This was an act of aggression. "Emergency HOA meeting," it screamed in a 48-point bold, Angry Brenda font, which I think is just Times New Roman with bad intentions. Topic: the Johnson Weed situation. Subject: the preservation of our community standards and property values. When? Tonight, 7 p.m., Community Clubhouse. Attendance is mandatory. "Oh, mandatory," I said to Sarah, who was reading it over my shoulder. "She's going to mandate my attendance?" "Frank, she sounds serious," Sarah said. She used underlines and bold. "This isn't a flyer," I said, ripping it from the door. "This is a summons. This is a duel at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse." "Please," Sarah begged. "Just don't quote the bylaws at her. It's embarrassing." "Embarrassing? It's my only weapon." At 6:55 p.m., the clubhouse was packed. And I mean packed. I hadn't seen this many people in one place since the free chili dog day at the 7-Eleven. This wasn't a meeting, it was the suburbs' equivalent of a gladiator match, and I was the guy with the net and trident. Everyone was there. Dave, who looked like he hadn't slept, was in the back. A woman I'd never seen before, who I mentally called Mrs. Taupe, was there. The guy who got fined for having a non-standard basketball hoop was there. The air was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and suburban rage. At 7 p.m. on the dot, Brenda strode to the podium. She was in full battle rattle, the visor, the polo, and a blazer. A blazer. She tapped the microphone. A piercing squeal shot through the room, and we began. She had a PowerPoint. I'm not kidding. She had PowerPoint. The first slide just said, "The threat." "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice tight. "As you know, we are facing a crisis." She clicked to the next slide. It was a picture of my house, an extreme, grainy zoom in on my dandelion field. "This anarchy is what Mr. Frank Johnson of 124 Chestnut has brought to our community." All eyes on me. I gave a little, "What, me?" shrug. She had slides. She had close-ups of dandelions on her lawn. She had a slide titled, "The Threat to Our Property Values," with a bunch of scary red downward-pointing arrows. She had a slide with a stock photo of a child crying. I'm not sure what the dandelions had done to the child. Maybe he was allergic? And this contempt for our shared values, this weaponization of a loophole, is an act of aggression against all of us. She was on a roll. She was practically frothing. And that is why, she clicked to her final, terrifying slide. "I am calling for an emergency vote on the Dandelion Act." "The Dandelion Act?" I said from my seat, a little too loud. "An emergency bylaw," she said, glaring at me, "banning the taraxacum from all properties. Effective immediately. All in favor." She raised her hand. Mrs. Taupe raised her hand. But that was it. The room was just murmuring. "Brenda?" a guy in the front said. I think he was the basketball hoop guy. "Isn't that a little fast? I mean, it's an emergency!" Brenda snapped. And that was my cue. I stood up. The chair scraped against the linoleum. The room went silent. "Hi," I said, feeling my palms get sweaty. I hadn't prepared a speech. "Everyone, Frank Johnson, 124 Chestnut. The dandelion guy. a few nervous chuckles. Look, Brenda's right. I did it. I planted them. Gasps. This was better than cable. And you know why? I held up the original, crumpled, $100 fine. Because she fined me for pink flowers. A new murmur went through the crowd. A different kind of murmur. A murmur of recognition. She fined me $100 for sunset coral petunias, I said, my voice getting stronger. And basketball hoop guy? She fined you because your kids were playing basketball. And Dave, I pointed to the back. Dave, she fined you last month, didn't she? Because your garden hose was visible for more than 3 hours after 6 p.m. Dave sank lower in his chair, but he nodded. This isn't about property values, I said, finding my rhythm. It's about control. It's about bylaws so thick you could stop a bullet with them. I read the book. The problem isn't that I broke the rules. The problem is Brenda doesn't like the rules I followed. This is unacceptable, Brenda shrieked, banging her fist on the podium. We are voting on the Dandelion Act. It's an emergency. Point of order, I yelled. I'd learned their language. I'd learned it well. The room went dead silent. Even Brenda stopped. Point of order? She stammered. Yes, Brenda. Point of order. I pulled the laminated bylaw sheet from my back pocket. It was getting a lot of use. According to your bylaws, Article 9, emergency bylaws require a clear and present danger to the community. And Article 12, Section 4, states, all new landscaping rules must be reviewed by the Architectural Committee for 30 days. I let that hang in the air. So, Brenda, I said, my voice dropping, my question for the board is, are dandelions a clear and present danger? Are they going to burn our houses down? Are they going to steal our children? Or, I looked around the room. Are they just yellow? Silence. A pin drop. You could hear Sir Reginald fart silence. And then neighbor Dave stood up. Poor, tired, vacuum-wielding Dave. He's got a point, Dave said, his voice quiet but clear. And, Brenda, you did fine me for the hose. And the week before you sent me a warning because my welcome mat was excessively jaunty. Jaunty? Someone whispered. It said, welcome to the burbs, Dave said, a single tear of frustration rolling down his cheek. It was over. The tide had turned. The vote wasn't even close. The Dandelion Act failed in a glorious, fiery yellow explosion of apathy and pent-up resentment. The meeting dissolved. Brenda looked broken. She just deflated. I was the victor. I was the king of the meadow. The aftermath was quiet. My yard was still a dandelion field, now mostly gone to fluff. I was a local hero to some. Basketball hoop guy gave me a solemn nod every time he saw me, and a villain to others. Mrs. Tope now crosses the street to avoid me. But Brenda was silent. No letters, no drive-by clipboardings, nothing. Until a week later. A new letter arrived. In the mailbox. In a plain, white, unembossed envelope. I opened it, my hands slightly trembling. Was this it? Was this the $10,000 lawsuit? It was not. It was a settlement offer. I read it, my jaw dropping. Sarah, get in here. What? Did she finally declare you a sovereign citizen? No. They surrendered. The letter from the HOA, but not, I noted, signed by Brenda, offered to pay for the remediation. That's fancy talk for hiring Miguel. They would pay to have my pollinator-friendly ground cover professionally removed. They would pay to have Grade A fescue sod installed. And in return, they would graciously waive the original $100 petunia fine. They were paying me to stop. "You win," Sarah said, reading it. She actually looked impressed. "You win, you crazy dandelion planting man." I win," I said, dazed. I accepted, of course. I'd made my point, and honestly, the fluff was starting to get in my coffee. Miguel came back. He didn't even squint this time. "Mr. Johnson, the dirt guy again." "No, Miguel. Today, I'm the grass guy." "Pays the same," he'd said. And I swear, I saw him smile. Weeks later, all was quiet. My lawn was green, boring, acceptable, HOA approved green. I was on my porch, sipping a lemonade. It was peaceful. Brenda walked by. She was walking Sir Reginald. She looked at my lawn. She looked at me. She gave me a very, very suspicious look, but she nodded. A stiff, curt, "We shall never speak of this" nod. I nodded back. A truce. Sarah came out and sat next to me, handing me a cookie. "It's peaceful," she said. "I'm glad this is over, Frank. I mean it." "Me too, babe," I said, taking a bite. "Me too. Total peace." She smiled, and then her eyes drifted over to the small, unapproved petunia flower bed by the mailbox. The one that Miguel's guys had neatly retilled and planted with new approved pastel pink flowers. "Frank," she said, her voice slow, that "what did you do" tone coming back. "What is that?" I followed her gaze. There, nestled between two pastel pink petunias, was a small 9-inch plastic garden gnome. He was wearing a pointy red hat. He had a cheerful, slightly dopey smile, and he was holding a fishing rod. "What?" I said, taking a long sip of lemonade. "It's a gnome. I call him Brenda's Bane." Sarah stared at it. "Frank, are garden gnomes on the approved list?" I reached into my pocket. The laminated page was, of course, already there. "Not on the approved list," I said, a tiny smile playing on my lips. "Not on the prohibited list." I let her look at it for one more second. "And," I added, "if you look really closely, he's not holding a fish. He's holding a tiny plastic dandelion." I leaned back, closing my eyes, and enjoyed the suburban afternoon. I'd lost the battle for sunset coral, but I had unequivocally won the war.